for being here and not just physically present, but mentally present. I realize it's May, so if you're like, please somebody get me a margarita and send me to a beach somewhere. So I appreciate you being here mentally and physically. As Vicki said, I'm going to go over a little bit of the why behind PBIS and share a little bit about myself as well. My name is Audra Johnston-Zamora. I am a mother of 5. I should also say I'm in great company. I am a recovering 7th grade English teacher. You can see the gray hairs are still in there, right, from my experience of working in the 7th grade classroom. My jam, so you guys are my people. I am an Oakland native. I am a UC Berkeley graduate, but I'm also a former foster kid. And so I was moved around quite a bit, and I'll talk a teeny bit about that here today. But I'm a Disney fanatic. I'm an educator. I'm a constant learner. I'm always learning. And as Vicki said, I'm going to be getting my PhD here in the fall, so I'm super excited about that in special education. And then, oh yeah, on top of all those lovely things, I'm also a project coordinator at the Stanislaus County Office of Ed for all things PBIS multi-tiered system of supports. So I like to have this picture of all my lovely children in here. Some of you guys may be feeling the gamut of how they are expressing themselves through this picture. Most of you might be feeling like my baby Zozo right now. So again, I appreciate you guys being here with me today. All right, so we're going to start with an SEL opening routine. Today's SEL opening routine is called the blob tree. So what I want you to do right now is, first of all, if you haven't had a chance to just take a moment to yourself and take a nice deep breath, please do that right now. And then what I want you to do is please take a look at this lovely illustration here and pick one of the blobs that you best closely identify with in ters of how you are showing up in this room today. And I'll make sure you guys have these slides so that you have access to all this afterwards. So again, pick a blob that you feel like how you are feeling right now as you come into this space. Oh, Julie, would you mind pushing record?
I already did.
Oh, thank you. And then when you're ready, share with somebody sitting next to you which blob are you, and maybe a little bit of the why. Okay, we're going to take a few minutes to share. Which blob are you and why?
Maybe number 1, barely hanging on.
Yeah, is that 1 or 7? That's
I think it's the 1. I thought it was 7, but
That's
the 7 up there.
That's right. I'm 1 too. I was thinking the same one. Hanging in there. Yeah, hanging in.
I'm still swinging. You're still nice.
Yeah, that was pretty good too. You're tired hanging on.
Did 19 drop 14? That's what I'm wondering.
Oh, maybe.
Well,
I asked you on
Or maybe push them off.
I'm just after 2 seconds.
yeah. Could say something we don't know. Inside of that.
Yeah.
Number 8.
It's also, they're also numbers.
Something kind of little like
Turning around, not even
If your partner
participating.
has a chance to go, make sure your partner All right, let's come back together and I'm a walker. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Anybody want to share which blob are you? Yeah.
I am a 1. I am hanging in there, baby.
Okay.
Hour by hour.
Okay, hour by hour, moment by moment. Thank you very much. Anybody else feeling kind of like a 1? Okay, all right. Very nice. One other person. Let me hear from one other person. Yes, Bianca.
I said 13 because I'm kind of in the middle. Like I worked my way up the branch.
Okay.
But I'm like also kind of tired.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, now I'm sitting on the branch.
You're like, I'm up here halfway. Okay, but now I'm just chilling. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing, my friends, right? Take this with you if you want to do a quick activity just to check in with folks. One thing I will say, don't ever do an opener like this and have kids who are feeling kind of 14 or just not in a good mood, and you go, all right, well, let's talk about math. Okay? Don't just dismiss their feelings like that. Make sure you know you have a structure to kind of check in with them if possible. Or if that's above your pay grade, you know who you can refer those students to, okay? All right, thank you for engaging in that activity. Now, we have a few, what I like to call depression slides. They're very much my reality, but we're gonna talk here about your reality in terms of the students that you're servicing, okay? So before the pandemic, and I hate to say the pandemic, right, because all of us are like, oh, I'm so tired of hearing it, and I feel it, but that's the point of reference. And it sounds a little bit better than PP reality, right? So, in 1995, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente conducted a research study with 17,500 participants. And what they found as they surveyed those 17,500 participants is that 6 out of 10 of them had experienced at least one traumatic experience in their life before the age of 18. That study, does anybody know what that study was called? It is called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, the ACE study. You took my class,
I knew the ACEs. I knew what ACEs stand for. I just didn't know that that was the name of the study.
Yeah, so that's what the study is called. Those numbers also hold true in California as we contextualize for the state, with 63.5% of Californians reporting having been exposed to at least one traumatic experience. One ACE, okay? So it's pretty common. And when I'm talking about traumatic experiences, I'm not talking about I stubbed my toe or I lost my soccer game last Friday, as dysregulating as it may feel. We are specifically talking about physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical, emotional neglect, somebody in my household who had a mental illness, a mother that was treated violently, divorce, an incarcerated relative, or substance abuse. Those are the 10 adverse childhood experiences that they surveyed those participants with. And again, 6 out of 10 have been exposed to at least one. Okay? Of those participants, in addition to that, 17.6% of Californians have reported having 4 or more of those ACEs. Okay? 4 or more. And that is a big marker in terms of some real big health implications and the way that we maybe, if we've experienced some of those adverse childhood experiences, but also how our students are showing up and if they even show up, okay? So there's some real big body, mind health implications for folks who have been exposed to high doses of trauma, okay? In addition to that, we know that homelessness in the state of California is on the rise. The last numbers I looked at were taken from 2020, continue to be on the rise, and it's only going to get worse. So our kids are really dealing with a whole heck of a lot, more than probably some of us, even as adults, could probably manage to bear. Or perhaps we've managed, or we've bared, or we've dealt with in our lives as well. So here's just a bigger look at it. What they found is a dose-response correlation. If you don't know what that means, the more of these you have, the more of these you have. And for somebody like me, I have all 10 ACEs. And so ultimately, if this kind of trajectory is not disrupted somehow, and we'll talk about how you disrupt that trajectory. Ultimately, somebody like me, I have a 17 to 20 year shorter life expectancy than somebody who hasn't experienced those adverse childhood experiences. Okay. So again, lifelong implications. Okay. So I am going to show you a video. It is video that I make sure that I show all teachers anytime I get in front of them, leaders, admin, district personnel, whoever. It is very medically centered. I want you guys to hang on because I know it's hot and I know it's May, okay? But what I want you to think about as you watch this, how does this pertain to you? Or do you feel that it even pertains to you, okay? So that's your guiding question as we watch this video. I'm hoping this will work. Will it work from here? Is this touchscreen?
That mouse goes to sleep.
Yeah. It knows it's May too.
Click the mouse. There you go.
Yay.
In the mid-90s, the CDC and Kaiser Permanente discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 of the leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. And yet doctors today are not trained in routine screening or treatment. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or packaging chemical. It's childhood trauma. Okay, what kind of trauma am I talking about here? I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game. I am talking about threats that are so severe or pervasive that they literally get under our skin and change our physiology. Things like abuse or neglect, or growing up with a parent who struggles with mental illness or substance dependence. Now, for a long time, I viewed these things in the way I was trained to view them, either as a social problem, refer to social services, or as a mental health problem, refer to mental health services. And then something happened to make me rethink my entire approach. When I finished my residency, I wanted to go someplace where I felt really needed, someplace where I could make a difference. So I came to work for California Pacific Medical Center, one of the best private hospitals in Northern California. And together, we opened a clinic in Bayview Hunters Point, one of the poorest, most underserved neighborhoods in San Francisco. Now, prior to that point, there had been only one pediatrician in all of Bayview to serve more than 10,000 children. So we hung a shingle, and we were able to provide top quality care regardless of ability to pay. It was so cool. We targeted the typical health disparities: access to care, immunization rates, asthma hospitalization rates, and we hit all of our numbers. We felt very proud of ourselves. But then I started noticing a disturbing trend. A lot of kids were being referred to me for ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. But when I actually did a thorough history and physical, what I found was that for most of my patients, I couldn't make a diagnosis of ADHD. Most of the kids I was seeing had experienced such severe trauma that it felt like something else was going on. Somehow, I was missing something important. Now, before I did my residency, I did a master's degree in public health. And one of the things that they teach you in public health school is that if you're a doctor and you see 100 kids that all drink from the same well, and 98 of them develop diarrhea, you can go ahead and write that prescription for dose after dose after dose of antibiotics, or you can walk over and say, what the hell is in this well? So I began reading everything that I could get my hands on about how exposure to adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. And then one day, my colleague walked into my office and he said, Dr. Burke, have you seen this? In his hand was a copy of a research study called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. That day changed my clinical practice and ultimately my career. The adverse childhood experiences study is something that everybody needs to know about. It was done by Dr. Vince Felitti at Kaiser and Dr. Bob Onda at the CDC, and together they asked 17,500 adults about their history of exposure to what they called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Those include physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, physical or emotional neglect, parental mental illness, substance dependence, incarceration, parental separation or divorce, or domestic violence. For every yes, you would get a point on your ACE score. And then what they did was they correlated these ACE scores against health outcomes. What they found was striking. Two things. Number one, ACEs are incredibly common. 67% of the population had at least one ACE, and 12.6%, 1 in 8, had 4 or more ACEs. The second thing that they found was that there was a dose-response relationship between ACEs and health outcomes. The higher your ACE score, the worse your health outcomes. For a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, their relative risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease was 2.5 times that of someone with an ACE score of 0. For hepatitis, it was also 2.5 times. For depression, it was 4.5 times. For suicidality, it was 12 times. A person with an ACE score of 7 or more had triple the lifetime risk of lung cancer and 3.5 times the risk of ischemic heart disease, the #1 killer in the United States of America. Well, of course, this makes sense. You know, some people looked at this data and they said, come on, yeah, you have a rough childhood, you're more likely to drink and smoke and do all these things that are going to ruin your health. This isn't science. This is just bad behavior. It turns out this is exactly where the science comes in. We now understand, better than we ever have before, how exposure to early adversity affects the developing brains and bodies of children. It affects areas like the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure and reward center of the brain that is implicated in substance dependence. It inhibits the prefrontal cortex, which is necessary for impulse control and executive function, a critical area for learning. And on MRI scans, we see measurable differences in the amygdala, the brain's fear response center. So there are real neurologic reasons why folks exposed to high doses of adversity are more likely to engage in high-risk behavior. And that's important to know. But it turns out that even if you don't engage in any high-risk behavior, you're still more likely to develop heart disease or cancer. The reason for this has to do with the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. How does it work? Well, imagine you're walking in the forest and you see a bear. Immediately, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol. And so your heart starts to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open up, and you are ready to either fight that bear or run from the bear. And that is wonderful if you're in a forest and there's a bear. But the problem is what happens when the bear comes home every night. And this system is activated over and over and over again. And it goes from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health damaging. Children are especially sensitive to this repeated stress activation because their brains and bodies are just developing. High doses of adversity not only affect brain structure and function, they affect the developing immune system, developing hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. So for me, this information threw my old training out the window, because when we understand the mechanism of a disease, when we know not only
Sorry guys, I'm just gonna.
that's a
speed it up for you
terrifying
guys.
prospect. The scope and scale of the problem seems so large that it feels overwhelming to think about how we might approach it. But for me, that's actually where the hope lies. Because when we have the right framework, when we recognize this to be a public health crisis, then we can begin to use the right toolkit to come up with solutions. From tobacco to lead poisoning to HIV/AIDS, the United States actually has quite a strong track record with addressing public health problems. But replicating those successes with ACEs and toxic stress is going to take determination and commitment. And when I look at what our nation's response has been so far, I wonder, why haven't we taken this more seriously? You know, at first, I thought that we marginalized the issue because it doesn't apply to us, right? That's an issue for those kids in those neighborhoods, which is weird because the data doesn't bear that out. The original ACEs study was done in a population that was 70% Caucasian, 70% college educated. But then, the more I talk to folks, I'm beginning to think that maybe I had it completely backwards. If I were to ask, how many people in this room grew up with a family member who suffered from mental illness? I bet a few hands would go up. And then if I were to ask how many folks had a parent who maybe drank too much, or who really believed that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child, I bet a few more hands would go up. Even in this room, this is an issue that touches many of us. And I'm beginning to believe that we marginalize the issue because it does apply to us. Maybe it's easier to see in other zip codes because we don't want to look at it. We'd rather be sick. Fortunately, scientific advances and frankly, economic realities make that option less viable every day. The science is clear. Early adversity dramatically affects health across the lifetime. Today, we are beginning to understand how to interrupt the progression from early adversity to disease and early death. And 30 years from now, the child who has a high ACE score and whose behavioral symptoms go unrecognized, whose asthma management is not connected, and who goes on to develop high blood pressure and early heart disease or cancer will be just as anomalous as a 6-month mortality from HIV/AIDS. People will look at that situation and say, what the heck happened there? This is treatable. This is beatable. The single most important thing that we need today is the courage to look this problem in the face and say, this is real, and this is all of us. I believe that we are the movement. Thank you.
All right, at your tables, you had your guiding question. How does this pertain, if at all, does this pertain to you as an educator? And if so, how? So go ahead and.
It does explain how some kids behave, that they have, their brain hasn't developed in the right places, and really realize how to behave.
They've had to deal with a lot of that stuff, and we're seeing.
We're seeing the effects of it. And sometimes you feel like they're just not being mentioned. Maybe they can't process it the same.
The big garbage can
What's
across the
going on in
room.
their brain?
By the door, there's usually one.
It really makes you think, huh?
And if they're going, like some, maybe they have, it's not in the past, it's actually happening right now. So,
Yeah.
like, what does that put school?
Yeah. Like the video said, that sometimes you just want to want to just brush it off as bad behavior. I think sometimes I
There's
gotta look,
underlying things.
I gotta look more into those underlying things.
I do feel like it's a little harder though at our age because we only see them for just a snippet of the day.
I know. Gotta get everything done.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's come back together in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Sorry about that, guys. I normally give folks a little more time to talk, but I just want to get through this. I have some pretty important and relevant things to get to before before I let you go. So let me hear from 2 people. What did you guys say very quickly at your tables in regards to that video? How does that pertain to you? How does that information pertain to you as an educator?
Well, it does because, obviously, what you're showing,
Yeah.
experience all these, abuse and physical dysfunction, behavior, etc.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Julie?
So essentially, our kids are coming in, we're trying to teach, but our kids are coming in with so much more, so many layers, and it's the bear.
It's the bear.
It's the bear.
Right. So what I like to tell people is that how many of you have almost been in a car accident or something that like scared you, or you get nervous before a game or presenting in front of your staff or whatever it may be, that feeling you get, right, that you're really jittery and nervous, some of our kids show up to our school rooms like that, feeling that at home, right? The bear comes home with them every night. I was one of those kids, right? And so you have to really work to convince me, why do I care about this English concept, right? When I'm worried about how I'm going to eat, or whether my dad's going to do something to me, or whether my mom's going to get beat up tonight, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time here, but the reality is COVID has just made it worse for some of our students who had it bad already. If they had mental health issues, disabilities, so on and so forth, it's just made it a teeny bit worse. I tell people, and Becca, when we were talking about it, right, I said, hey, what's the #1 punishment in the United States of America? What do? You put them in jail, and what's even worse than that?
Isolation.
Just think about that, you guys, when we think about the impact it's had on our kids. Thank you very much. Okay, so what the heck does all of this mean for you guys, right? You know that there's some neurological stuff going on, but really, why do you care? Okay. This study was conducted in 2010. That's less important, but what I want you to know, that they looked at 2,100 children across 10 elementary school sites. Of those 2,100 children, 240 of them had 3 or more ACEs. And amongst those students, here's what they found. 3 times the academic failure, 5 times the rate of chronic truancy, 6 times the rate of behavior problems, and 4 times the rate of poor health. These are some of the kids that you're dealing with every single day, okay? So think about that. So let me just kind of break it down here really quickly, and then I have another quicker video than the previous video for you to watch. So here's what happens. Here's a little bit of neuroscience 101. So when students do not feel safe, physically or socially, I think a lot of people think, active shooter, yeah, safety. No, you also have to feel a part of a tribe. You have to feel a sense of belonging. Okay? The survival part of their brain is activated. That's called the amygdala. You heard Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris talk about that for a second there. When the amygdala is activated in any human, it expels adrenaline and cortisol, and all oxygen and nutrients are focused and sent to that part of the brain. It's kept us alive. Thank you, right? Like that part of the brain, right, has kept us alive. But because of this, the learning part of the brain, your prefrontal cortex, is essentially offline, sipping a margarita somewhere waiting for you on that beach, okay? And is nearly unable to recall or receive any information. So in order for students, or again, any human, to be able to learn, the amygdala must be regulated and calm by first creating a sense of physical and social safety. I don't care what kind of dog and pony show you have. If a kid is triggered, dysregulated, they're not going to be able to learn or recall information. That is not touchy-feely SEO, Berkeley, Audra. That is neuroscience. Okay? So I'm going to have Dr. Bruce Perry explain this dynamic here for you in a second. So that, because he's much more skilled at this than I am.
Starts to get processed.
So there we go.
Now this is an essential learning for anybody interested in education or parenting or social emotional learning. And that is that this incoming input from the external world and from your internal world, the first stop, the first place all that information goes is to these lower parts of the brain. And the lower parts of the brain are not very smart. There's not a lot of complex processing going on here. This is a part of the brain that is involved in, if you will, very simplistic problem solving. Now, fortunately, most of the time, that problem solving involves sorting and just sending the information up to the middle part of your brain, where there's another process that goes on where you can sort your information, and then you finally get that up to the top part of your brain. And so what I want you to appreciate is that your brain has to sequentially process information in order to get to your cortex. And the major consequence of that is that the emotional and the relational parts of your brain have first dibs on processing information even before it gets to your cortex. Which means that you can have, let's say that you've got somebody who's got a history of being exposed to combat, and I know that this is not relevant necessarily direct to kids, but this helps you understand what can happen. Here's the year. Somebody's walking along 25 years after, 30 years after Vietnam, and they hear an explosion. And that information comes in the lowest part of your brain, and that because there was an association made between loud noises and the need to activate your stress response gets activated in an extreme way. So the processing that takes place first down here results in the activation of your stress response, which then basically shuts down your cortex. There's what we call state-dependent change in how you process cognitive information. And so now this could be a memory of all kinds of stuff. This could be that you've got a developmental history of exposure to somebody who was yelling at your mother all the time. And so whenever there's yelling in the classroom, that it immediately shuts down the cortex of this individual. And I'll show you a different way to think about this. So here you are, calm, relaxed. When you have no external threat, you're not hungry, you're not thirsty, you're not cold, you got your cortex is open for business. And you can teach to this kid, and that child is going to learn a lot. But you can have other individuals who, for whatever reason, if they are distressed, if they feel threatened, if they have a history of trauma, if they come from chaos, if they have they're very distressed for any variety of reasons, they will shut down their cortex. And of course, no matter how wonderful you are as a teacher, if that's the way this child is organized, you're not going to be able to get up to the cortex to do all the teaching you want to do.
All right. Sorry guys, I'm having to go back and forth between this and this. All right. So you heard Dr. Bruce Perry, who's one of the leading psychiatrists that works in the United States. In fact, he did some work with the kids who were released from Waco and then subsequently had their siblings perish in the shootout. So he works with some of the most, and if you ever get a chance to read his book, In Pieces, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, I encourage you to do so. Okay, So again, you saw him kind of explaining that, right? If a kid is triggered in any ways, prefrontal cortex is offline, right? So what can we do? How does this again pertain to you? So we have to create a sense of safety. Creating a sense of safety and establishing a sense of belonging, relationships is not a SEL add-on. Okay, I need people to stop thinking of it like that. It's actually required for learning. Okay, and again, that's the neuroscience. So really quickly, I want folks to think about this question and tell me, what do you guys are, because I know you guys are doing it. What are you already doing to help students feel safe? What are you already doing that establishes and strengthens relationships in your classroom?
Develop trust.
Develop trust, how do you do that?
Well, right at the beginning of the
Awesome.
Because if they don't trust you, they don't.
Very true. Yep. For many children who are abused at home or any kind of neglect or whatever it may be, my first memory and association, just like a combat veteran, right? My first memory is adult equals bad and hurt and pain and suffering. So we're really trying to undo a lot of that, even though, you know, maybe we didn't sign up for that, but we're the second in command, right? When it comes to creating those trusting adult relationships. What else? 2 other people. What else are you guys doing? Yeah.
Just like building relationships, you know, good morning, how you doing? Hey, where were you yesterday? Oh, nice haircut, you know, just the little things that I paid attention, I noticed.
For sure. Yeah, one other person.
Routines, establish routines and procedures, consistency.
Yes, I will Venmo you $20 for that, that little plug right there. Absolutely, right? Thank you very much, right? Absolutely, or Zelle or whatever, Cash App, you know, I got it all. All right, so I love that you guys are doing this in pockets, and I have met many a teacher who are doing this just naturally, right? And in pockets, but how I want to function and want our schools to function is not just in pockets. I want that to be happening at the school-wide site level and sometimes at district level. As Vicki mentioned, I'm at every single district, every single school in this district, and I would love to see site level implementation of PBIS because that's the closest thing we got to what I'm going to talk about here. Okay. Now the prevention model out of PBIS states, and this comes out of the medical model. Kaiser does this real good. Drink water, avoid sugary foods, right? Walk 30 minutes, right? And they say if we just do that, that's going to be effective for about 80% of our population, and the need for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions essentially will decrease. So same thing, but with behavior, okay? When students are systematically provided with clear, concise, and consistent behavior expectations, what are our expectations here at Dutcher? Somebody who's not on the PBIS team, yes,
Respectful, responsible, and safe.
Yes, respectful, responsible, safe are taught those expectations explicitly and given a chance to actually model them and practice them and have those expectations positively reinforced. The need for tier 2 and tier 3 interventions is significantly decreased. We put our energy and efforts here, okay, instead of continuously putting out fires. Sit down, be quiet, sit down, be quiet, okay? And so that is essentially the basis of PBIS, okay? You will notice, because I always hear teachers, understandably so, because we notice the negative, our brains notice the negative. Again, that's what kept us alive. Eat the red berries. No, don't eat the red berries, right? That there still are going to be students who have additional need in your classroom. We're not segregating them, okay? Some of them might be, but you will still have some issues in your classroom. It's not 100%, it's not a magic bullet. So what can you guys do to create those safe environments? I heard you say it. Routine, consistency, predictability. A lot of our students who do come from high trauma environments, chaos. That's what it is, chaos. So how can you support them? Create routine, create procedures, create predictability, okay? Through that common language, okay? Respectful, responsible, safe. You can also use this as a reteach tool. Hey, look, Zabelli, it's not my rule you're breaking. Remember that here at Dutcher, respectful means we're using kind words. So let's try that again, okay? Talk to your friend using kind words, please. Okay. What else can you do? Focus on the positive and use those diamond bucks. The diamond bucks aren't for the kids. It's a little secret. The diamond bucks are for you. You're literally rewiring your brain. Because as I mentioned, our brain notices the negative. It's kept us alive. But those diamond bucks, when I was in the classroom, when I started on a PBIS team at Creekside Middle School, you can check my reference, it's all good. Bianca and Jose's got me right, yes. So I put those roar tickets, we have roar tickets in the pockets of my dresses, because I always have dresses with pockets, right? So I literally would put 5 in my pocket a day. That was it. That was the goal I set for myself, 5. I had to notice 5 kids doing good. Okay, totally, sometimes I did it, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes I was able to do it, sometimes I wasn't. I forgave myself when I couldn't do it, but then I started back over the next day, okay? But it's meant for you to notice the positive, and for our most vulnerable students, that positive interaction is critical for their learning. Remember relationships, right? Use them whenever you see a student going above and beyond, or when you have a student that you know you're working on something with them. Okay? And maybe I'm working on this gentleman right here. I'm working on him getting his homework out on time, right? And so finally on Friday when he gets it out, hey man, thank you for being responsible. I love how you got your homework out on time. Okay? That's what I'm just gonna notice him. Okay? That's not the only way, but that is a great way to use the diamond bucks. The key is to also provide positive and specific feedback to the students as you provide them with the ticket. If you don't have time to give the feedback, you don't have time to give the ticket. The ticket doesn't change the behavior. The kids don't give a crap about your ticket, okay? What they really need and what is gonna sustain change behavior is the feedback that you give them, just like I did right here, okay? Wow, Audra, I appreciate you remembering to be safe and walking at all times when you're in the hallway. Put your own little spin on it, okay? Is it gonna feel wonky? Yeah. Because we're not used to giving positive praise, okay? Our brains, it takes a little bit of getting used to, so overlearn, okay? All right, number 3, my tip in terms of what you can do about this, the trauma that we have experienced or that we know exists in our classrooms, is respond to unwanted behavior with compassion. Okay? This one's a really big one for me. So I'm just gonna read it because so I don't get dysregulated. I just put my notes up here and I try not to put too many words, but this is one where I really just want to read to you guys. All behavior serves a function. Behavior is a form of communication. Okay, and that function that it serves is not just to piss you off. I can say piss, right? I'm sorry, middle schooler, you guys have heard it, probably worse, okay? But behavior is a form of communication. Start to see their behavior, because really what it is pain-based connection-seeking behavior. And lead with compassion when you can. Obviously, you gotta care for your own mental health and well-being. But when you can, lead with compassion, right? Obviously, there will be times when, for safety or sanity reasons, that you need to remove a student, but consider for a moment. Our behavior is an adaptation to our environment. What kind of environment has that student lived in for this to be their go-to response? When we think about some of the most prickly animals on the planet, right? They live in the most harshest environments. We accept that in those animals, but we don't accept that in our students, right? Could this student's behavior possibly be an uncontrollable fight, flight, or freeze? What does flight look like in the classroom? Yep, a student
I'm not gonna do this.
leaves, right? What do we, elopes, right? What does fight look like in the classroom? Talking back, arguing, right? What does freeze look like in the classroom? Shut down, complete head down, right? I'm not saying 100% of the time it's due to trauma, but if you know the number 6 out of 10, it's most likely perhaps an uncontrollable response for your student, okay? And so just having a little bit of compassion. They've done research on what's an effective buffer between when your student has a behavior and how you respond to them, because a part of discipline is how we show up. I use the example when my daughter, my little 4-year-old, this one, right? When she spills milk and I'm cool and I don't got anywhere to go, that's okay, Zozo. It's okay. No use in crying over spilled milk, honey. Go get a paper towel. Have your brother help you. Go clean it up. See, honey, you got it. But when I got somewhere to go and I'm irritated and I'm hungry, girl, if you don't hurry up and get, God dang it, right? Right? So how I show up has a part to play in my discipline and my expectations, right? Not to say that's wrong. That's all of our reality. But if I could put 10 seconds in between her behavior and how I respond to it, the research suggests I'm going to be more effective with managing that behavior, okay? Try not to have higher expectations of your students than you have of yourself. Their brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. I'm gonna say that one more time. Please try not to have higher expectations of your students than you have of yourselves. Okay? Yes, you are all professionals. I didn't say, hey, please stay off your devices or take your hats off or you could eat or you couldn't eat, right? But nonetheless, if you're sitting here and you are having some behaviors, think about your students. What do you expect of them? Okay, is it a higher expectation than you yourself can meet? Sorry, that's a tough pill to swallow. And I told you guys were clapping in the beginning, but watch. Okay, so I wouldn't be a recovering English teacher. Vicki, would you mind helping me pass? You have two choices. If you are more electronically inclined, you can use this QR code to access the article on your here. You know, I'm just gonna put all my folks here. There you go. If you want the actual physical article, I want you guys to take a few minutes to read it. Do you want the article? Thank you. Okay. Article. Yeah, no worries. There you go.
Thank you.
There you go. Yes. All right. So I don't know about you guys, but I know I need it completely silent as I read so I can actually understand the article. This is one of the most important and empowering articles I ever read as an in-classroom teacher. And so I do want us to take the time to read it and read it fast. Article. Thank you guys. guys here for as long as I have. But I just want to say, I hope you keep this article, and if you didn't get a chance to really actually read it, it's an easy read. It is super practical, and you know, what pushes me, this is actually my last time speaking in front of teachers, so I'm probably a little emotional, but I just want to say, like, what you guys do matters every day. You have the ability to either be traumatizing to kids or to be a therapeutic encounter. What inspired me was my 7th grade English teacher, Miss Rowland. Did she know when I was in her class, I was an ass? I will say that. I was disrespectful, I was a class clown, I was disruptive. And she decided to look beneath that behavior. And instead of just kick me out, which already, when I was trying to figure out why my mom chose a certain lifestyle over me, all of our brains fill it in with negative. So I said, it's because I'm a bad kid, right? And so even as a 37-year-old woman, I struggle with that narrative in my head today. And so Miss Rowland, she decided to look underneath that behavior and to try to get to know me, and she loved me. She paid for me to go on my Washington, D.C. and New York trip. Y'all, I'm not saying y'all got to do all that, but I'm just saying Miss Rowland changed my life. Did she know when I was in her class being an ass that she was changing the literal trajectory of my life? Probably not. You guys know anything about foster kids, only 2 to 3% end up in a 4-year institution, and of those 2 to 3%, 10% graduate, okay? And I'm gonna be, as you heard, getting my PhD here next fall, okay? And I thank you very much. And I attribute that to Miss Rowland. The first time I bought my home, she was there at my house with her mi casa bowls. I broke one the other day and I was almost in tears, okay? Seriously, this is a true story. So, you know, a caring relationship with a trusted adult with teaching resilience through skill building, right? So it's the difference between do this because I said so and do this because I care about you. Do this because I love you. I'm pushing you academically because my success is so deeply intertwined with your success that I need you to do this right now. That lands a little different on kids, but you can't push kids without the relationships, okay? And what we know is that when you have those things coupled together, Miss Rowland did not, I was became a 7th grade English teacher, right? She didn't lower her expectations of me, but she pushed me once she had established that relationship, okay? And we know that together that has reduced, it reduces the effects of trauma and stress on students and has the potential for healthier outcomes for our kids, okay? So what you guys do matters every day. I'm gonna make sure you have access to this. If you haven't seen Rita Pearson's video, which I'm sure many of you have, please be a champion for your kid. Just really 1 second before we leave today. Take one deep breath for me, please. And think really quickly about what was shared here today. What is one piece of information that you plan on taking with you and putting into practice tomorrow or next year or whatever it may be, and tell somebody sitting next to you?
10 seconds. 10 seconds, yes. React a little different, yeah.
It is
So I can allow myself
try to make that
be a little bit more aware of other things, which allows me to maybe smile or say hello or something.
You're a tester underneath that.
But maybe, but I just often so hyper focus on.
Because that's what you do all day.
Yeah. So I'm just doing that. So I'm not.
All right, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you hear my voice, clap twice. Thank you guys very much. If you didn't, pick up anything about the PBIS stuff, that's cool. The one thing I want you to take with you today is to just be a little bit kinder, be a little nicer, give your kids a little smile, a little fist bump, whatever, every day. Guess what? It not only provides them with a happy, consistent connection, but it gives you a nice little dopamine hit too. So just move forward, and thank you for all that you do. Have a lovely rest of your day.
It's on the side.